Well, thank you all for joining us for tonight's webinar, The Science of Cravings. This is the final webinar in a 4-part series exploring the science behind food and things related to food. I'm Greg Berry, Assistant Director in the UAB Office of Alumni Affairs. Just a quick note, since this is a virtual event, don't be surprised if something seems out of place or technical issues pop up. If you have any issues with your video or audio dropping out or freezing during tonight's webinar, click the reconnect button at the top of your screen. This will get you back to the webinar right away. So why do you have cravings and how can you stop them? I'm so curious to find out from Dr. Holly Wyatt. Tonight we will uncover the truth about why you crave certain foods and how you can crush your cravings. Now, before I formally introduce tonight's guest, I'd like to ask everybody a question. What do you typically crave? Do you usually crave baked sweets like pastries and cakes? Perhaps it's spicy food or even things like potato chips, so salty. How about crunchy or crispy foods that snap when you eat them? Or maybe chocolate, and I'm sure that one's going to be a popular choice. Or possibly soft, starchy foods like breads or pastas. That's my guilty pleasure. And lastly, ice cream. I'm going to go ahead and keep the poll up for a few moments to let you chime in. If you have any questions during tonight's webinar, please drop them in the chat. I'll make sure that Dr. Wyatt has a chance to answer those questions after her presentation tonight. I'm going to go ahead and keep that poll up just for a few more seconds. And kind of as I thought, chocolate is a very popular vote. Baked sweets actually first. Matt, go ahead and take that poll down. Here are the results of tonight's poll. Baked sweets got 33% of tonight's vote, with chocolate at 22, salty foods and crunchy or crispy foods tied for third. So interesting results there, and we'll get more from that here in a little bit. So thank you all for participating in that. At this time, I would like to introduce tonight's guest. Tonight we welcome Dr. Holly Wyatt. Dr. Holly is a professor of nutrition sciences in the UAB School of Health Professions. She has more than 20 years of clinical experience in weight reduction using behavioral treatment, dietary therapy, physical activity interventions, weight loss medications, and surgery. Dr. Holly earned her Doctor of Medicine from the Baylor College of Medicine in 1993. She served as medical director for seasons 4 and 5 of the ABC TV show Extreme Weight Loss. Dr. Holly has spent much of her research career following more than 10,000 successful losers in the National Weight Loss Registry to investigate what makes people successful during their weight loss journey. At this time, I would like to turn things over to Dr. Holly Wyatt. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
And your slides will slide in here just momentarily.
Wow.
There you go, and the platform is yours.
Great. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see so many people wanting to spend their Tuesday night talking about the science of cravings. So here's my game plan. Here's where we're going to go. I'm going to spend the first part of the evening talking about what is a craving. I think sometimes we get confused. We use the term addiction and craving. This talk is going to be about food cravings, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm then going to spend a little bit of time talking about how common are they and what causes a craving. I then want to spend the last part of this saying, what do you do about them? How can you prevent them? Can you decrease them? If you're a person that has frequent cravings and they tend to get you off track, so you're trying to stay on a diet or you're trying to eat a certain way because you have a health condition, and you get these cravings that tend to get you off track, can you prevent them? And then when you have them, what can you do about them? And then to end the presentation, I want to kind of just end on something fun. I'm going to talk about my top 10 crave-busting substitutions. So you're right there. You're thinking about eating the half gallon of ice cream. Is there something that you can substitute at that moment? So that's the plan. I think I'm going to talk hopefully 30, 40 minutes, and then I want to leave it open or leave some time for questions. So here we go. What is a food craving? A food craving is an intense, and that's an important word. They tend to be intense desire to eat a specific food or food type. This desire can be seen as uncontrollable, it's urgent, it's difficult to resist, and a person may feel as if that they cannot satisfy this urge until they eat that particular food. Food cravings are extremely common. I think that's probably one of the reasons why we had such a good turnout for this talk, is that a lot of people can relate to having them. Food cravings are typically transient and often for processed foods that are high in sugar, salt, and or fat. I want to spend just a minute talking about the difference between cravings and addiction. Sometimes we use them interchangeably, sometimes it's semantics, but I think it's important to understand there are some differences. Addiction involves compulsion, loss of control, discomfort on withdrawal, and dependence, which means needed to function without normal limits. In addition, addiction involves a positive active effect. So it has something positive and it actually changes your brain. There's neuroadaptive changes. Tolerance, sensitivity, withdrawal, and craving, there's the word, may accompany addiction. So you can be addicted to something and have cravings. But just because you have cravings does not mean you're addicted. I'm going to say that one more time. Just because you crave something doesn't mean you're addicted to it. There's lack of agreement as to what substances and activities are addictive. So there's discussion and not total agreement on that. Individuals vary in their vulnerability. There's no doubt about that. Some of us have more cravings or probably have reasons why we're going to have more cravings. Substances vary in their addictive potential. And there are commonalities between eating and drug use. However, most of the experts in the field, when you take the totality of the data, believe eating should not be viewed as an addictive behavior. And while food cravings are very common, we're going to talk about how common they are, but they're very common, food addiction is actually very rare. And I think that's important to remember. I tend to binge watch My 600-Pound Life. I'm sure none of you probably watch that, but doing what I do, I love to watch that show and to understand what's going on. In that show, when someone weighs 600 pounds, I do see true food addiction. But for the majority of my patients, or the majority of people who are overweight, trying to lose weight, who are obese, trying to lose weight, I don't believe that the majority of them are truly addicted to food, although food cravings are very, very common. So how common are they? Lots of different studies. Some studies estimate it is experienced by more than 90% of the adult population, so very, very common. There's even other surveys that have say 100% of young women and nearly 70% of young men have had food cravings in the past year. So what does that mean? That to experience a craving is normal. Most people do. What may be different is how many you have or how intense, and if they really get in the way of a goal. That is what may be different. But I think it's something that everybody can relate to, or the vast majority of people can very much relate to having food cravings. So who is more likely to have food cravings? Females with overweight or obesity are more likely to experience cravings than males. Men and women tend to crave different kinds of food, although it's not an exact science, but men report more craving for savory foods and women report more cravings for sweet foods. Men may crave different types of sweets. So when men do crave sweets, they tend to go more toward the sugar sweetened beverages. Not as often do they go toward the chocolate. A few studies have shown that more than 92% of those who experience strong cravings for chocolate are female. So that's interesting to look at with this poll. And cravings for sweets decline with age among women. I had to put that on there. I had to give some good news. I felt like we weren't getting any good news. So one thing that's good as we get older, cravings may decrease for sweets. So what about cravings and body weight? What do we know? People who have frequent cravings do tend to have higher BMIs. And that's not really surprising. I think you can figure that one out, since high-calorie foods tend to be what we crave. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. We don't tend to crave broccoli. We do tend to crave high energy dense foods, foods that have a lot of calories and a very small amount of food. And then that can cause us a problem, because that puts us in that positive energy balance where we tend to gain weight, therefore have a higher body mass index. Individuals who report food cravings display higher caloric intake than those who rarely experience food cravings. So they do believe that food cravings are part of why we see the issues that we have with obesity and overweight, that they're part of the reason that we have this epidemic, although they're not the whole reason, but they do explain a piece of it. Food cravings are related to greater weight gain over time and high lifetime body mass index. So what do we crave? You just did a little poll. It's interesting. Most of the things on that poll are on this slide. Number one, people tend to crave sugar and carbs of some type. At least that's what they say. I crave sugar, or they tend to use the word I'm a sugar addict. Other people may crave fat, salty foods, savory foods, crunchy foods, creamy foods. Chocolate is very, very popular when it comes to cravings. But one thing that most of these types of foods that we crave have in common is that they're energy dense, a lot of calories and a little bit of food. We want to get, that seems to be something that holds them together most of the time. Now, people tend to say that they crave carbs. That's what I always hear. Yes, I crave sugar. I crave carbs. But it's really interesting when you look at the foods that people say they crave and you break it down, they're not just carbohydrate. They're not just sugar. So this slide shows some of the most common things that people crave. You can see chocolate chip cookies, macaroni and cheese, candy bars, ice cream bar, French fries, potato chips. And you can look that even though people may say they crave carbs or they crave sugar, this is what they say they crave. And when you look at it, it's actually equal or even more calories coming from fat than coming from carbohydrate. So even though we say we crave carbs, when we look at the foods we crave, it tends to be a mixture of carbohydrate and fat. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in the Chicago airport and gone and gotten this popcorn. If you haven't, I think it's called the Chicago Mix. If you have not, do not go. I'm warning you now, just say no. Because this seems to be the perfect mix of something that you will crave. It's sweet, has a cheese flavor, it is salty, it's crunchy, it has high fat, and you have a portion that just doesn't seem to stop. So for many people, someone told me about this a couple of years ago, I went and had it, and now every time I walk by it, I'm like, ooh, I want some of that. So just say no. But this is pointing out that there's a lot of different reasons why we may crave something. In that case, it may be salty, it may be the sugar, it may be the crunchiness, or it may be just the memory of me eating that in the Chicago airport that tends to start the craving. But if you haven't had this, don't try it. You don't want to. So let's talk a little bit about what causes food cravings. And I know that you would love for me to make this simple. I know you would love for me to say, here is why we crave foods. That is not going to be the case. Just like there's multiple reasons why we gain weight, there isn't one reason why we're in the obesity epidemic. There's not one reason why people struggle to lose weight. There's not one reason, one pathway, one thing that I can say is the reason why we crave certain foods. There's a lot of reasons, and that makes sense. Anything that has to do with appetite, body weight regulation, food intake, there's redundancy in the system. And I think you're going to see that. There's lots of reasons why we may crave certain foods. But let's start with the brain. And when we start out, the idea is there's multiple regions in the brain that could be responsible and play a role in food cravings. There's not just one area. People might experience food cravings out of nowhere. We call those tonic cravings. So you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you're craving something. Or cravings can be related to seeing, smelling, or hearing about a specific food. You walk by someplace and suddenly you smell it and you want it. Or you see a commercial for pizza and now you crave it. That would be a cue-based craving. Like I said, there definitely are brain regions that seem to be responsible, that may be playing a role. There's areas that involve memory, pleasure, and reward. They also involve appetite centers of the brain, and they appear to be activated. Different areas, multiple areas of the brain appear to be activated during food craving episodes. Now, the problem is we see certain areas light up in our brain when associated with cravings, but we still don't understand it. You can imagine it's hard to study the human brain. Yes, we can study it in an animal or in a rat, but how do we actually study the human brain? And that makes it more difficult. We can see certain areas firing, lighting up, being involved, but we still don't completely understand even what that means. So some other causes of food craving. Several studies have suggested that eating a diet lacking in variety, so if you limit certain nutrients or lacking in energy, limiting calories, can lead to more food cravings. So when you go on a diet, there have been studies when you restrict how many calories you're taking in, there have been studies that show that food cravings tend to increase. And it is possible that some food cravings may be related to specific foods because the body needs a particular nutrient. If you go out on the internet and you look up food cravings, you're going to find a lot of experts or people who will say, if you crave this, it means that you're low in this. If you crave this, you're low in magnesium. If you crave this, you're low in B12. And while that is a hypothesis, I suppose, and it kind of makes sense, the idea that your body might send you out seeking something that you need, there is very little data to support that. And while we might like to think that's what's going on, like I said, we really don't have data to say that is actually what's going on. But it's possible, but there's limited data, even though if you were out on the internet, you would not think that was true. There is one exception to the rule, and I just wanted to kind of put this up here so you are aware. There's something called pica, which is craving and chewing substances that have no nutritional value, such as ice. And there is good literature to show that people who have a craving and chew ice a lot sometimes have iron deficiency. And that is something that you check for if someone comes to you and has a craving for chewing ice constantly. Although the reason why that goes together is actually not clear. So that's an exception to the rule that does have some data behind it. Other causes of food cravings. Our bodies may be programmed to crave foods high in calories. I mean, if you think about it, we were designed to go out there and eat food when it was available. There may have been times in our past where we didn't have any food. So even if we weren't hungry, there might be a mechanism that would have evolved in our bodies to say, if we see some food, even if we're not hungry, we should go out and eat it. We should crave it. We should seek it. So that may be part of just how we evolved. Humans have been able to survive times of famine and hardship throughout history, due largely to our ability to store excess calories consumed during times of plenty and to store it as body fat. So cravings may have served a purpose. And that may be that we still have those cravings, but we no longer really need them because we don't go through those periods of famine as often. Various factors can affect a person's food cravings. Hormonal fluctuations are associated, things that are associated with the menstrual cycle or pregnancy can be associated with cravings. I think many of you are familiar with that. Other hormones can be associated with cravings. An imbalance of hormones such as leptin and serotonin can also lead to food cravings. Protein and carbohydrates in a meal affect serotonin neurotransmission. There is one train of thought that meals high in protein may increase alertness, so you may then crave protein when you need that alertness. Meals high in carbohydrate may relieve depressed mood. Although once again, guys, limited data. We really don't understand exactly how this may play a role. There's a whole other group of people who really push and study this endogenous opioid system, the dopamine system, and the opioid system, and say that that's really what's playing a role in cravings. Naloxone, which is an opioid antagonist, meaning it blocks opioids, does tend to reduce food intake. So that's a medication that when we take, it tends to reduce food intake. When compared to opioid agonist drugs, so when we compare it to drugs that tend to stimulate the opioid system, food consumption is relatively weak. Food nowhere comes even close to the same stimulation we see with opioid and agonist. I did want to put this up there to talk about that there are some weight loss medications that have data that show that they can decrease cravings. Now, these weight loss medications are not approved by the FDA for cravings. They're approved for weight loss. That's what they were studied to do. However, cravings, they were studied also to look at their role in cravings. Is that part of the reason why they produce weight loss? And several of the newer medications that are listed on this slide do have data to say that they tend to decrease cravings. Why this is important: if you are someone who is appropriate for weight loss medication and you have cravings, it may be important for your doctor to pick one of the medications that has some data that it may actually help with one of the systems, one of the reasons why we have cravings, that you can actually decrease those cravings. And like I said, that may be one of the reasons why these weight loss medications work. We're not finished yet. What else causes cravings? And I think a lot of you might have guessed this: emotions and stress. Emotions can also contribute to food cravings. And in such cases, we tend to comfort eat. Cravings kick into high gear when we're stressed or when we're anxious. Carbohydrates may boost our levels of the serotonin hormone, which tends to have a calming effect. And a recent research study suggests that the combination of fat and sugar together may also have a calming effect. Food cravings may also arise to satisfy emotional needs, such as calming stress and reducing anxiety. And this may be something that we learned over time, or we learn over time. We have learned to love ourselves, to comfort ourselves, to calm ourselves with energy-dense foods, with foods that have a lot of fat and sugar and a lot of calories in a small amount of food. The good thing about this is I believe if we've learned to do this, we can unlearn it and we can potentially substitute other behaviors instead of doing something that might not be healthy for us. So a couple more things that can cause food cravings. It also doesn't hurt that the foods we typically crave taste good, and we usually have many enjoyable memories. And so the memory part of our brain is also involved, not just the appetite part, not just some of the other parts we talked about, but the memory part. Memory areas of the brain are actually more important to food cravings than the brain reward system. That's what some researchers believe. Habits and routines, and just, I come home from work, I drive by my favorite restaurant, and then suddenly I want to go in and, eat at that restaurant. And I have memories of that. So there's a lot of things that are playing a role in terms of why do we have cravings. And I know a lot of you would have loved to say there's easy, it's one thing. When you talk to researchers, they tend to be in one area and they will say this is what it is. But it's just like anything. There's multiple pathways. We're wired probably to do this for reasons in the past that might have been helpful. Now they're not so helpful. And there's probably not going to be one solution, because there's not just one single reason that we tend to crave foods. So what I want to spend the next 15, 20 minutes on is what can you do about it? If you're one of those people that has frequent cravings, what can you do? So my first thought is, can we prevent it? Yes, we can always treat something, but is there a way to prevent it? What can you do to actually prevent cravings? So if you're one of those people who has a lot of them, this is the slide for you. Here are some things you can think about doing. Number one, avoid hunger. A lot of times when we get hungry, that's when we start to crave things. And when we're hungry, we're going to, that's going to actually stimulate the craving. Next, eat nutrient-dense whole foods. So you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of nutrients. In case your cravings are because you're not having a certain nutrient, if that's the cause, if when you are eating food, you're eating for fuel, you're trying not to eat empty calories, you're eating nutrient-dense foods so that you have a variety of foods. I don't know that how many of you know this, but the theme for the guidelines, the nutrition guidelines that are current, is make every bite count, right? And the idea with that is to make each bite have nutrients, not energy. It's not about having many calories, but how many nutrients you can get in for a certain amount of calories. So eat nutrient-dense foods. Eat enough protein. Protein is associated with satiety, and that has been associated with decreasing cravings at times. Eat a variety of foods. So you really want to not let yourself get super hungry. Eat nutrient-dense foods, eat enough protein, and eat a variety of foods. Next, you want to reduce stress levels. Stress may be associated with cravings. So things that you can do that decrease your stress may prevent the cravings from happening. Keep your emotional cup full. That's nurture yourself. So what do I mean by that? A lot of times we learn to love ourselves. We learn to take care of ourselves by eating, and we like that. But if we keep our emotional cup full, where we're not stressed, where we don't need that our emotionally we're doing things to love ourselves all along, we may not have as many cravings. It may be when that emotional cup gets empty that we start to have cravings. Exercise. There's some data out there that frequent exercise, routine exercise may prevent cravings, especially high intensity. So if you're someone who has a lot of cravings, I would definitely say to start trying to get some exercise in there, maybe with some bouts of high intensity activity. Drink plenty of water. I'm going to talk about in a minute. Sometimes thirst is what it will be confused with having a craving, that you're really thirsty. So make sure you're drinking plenty of water and get enough sleep. The last one that has some data that people have shown is when you're, if you have frequent cravings, if you know, for instance, you have cravings in the evening, chew gum or even brush your teeth, trying to kind of break that habit may be helpful in actually decreasing cravings. So now that's prevention. That's all fine and good. We're going to prevent them. But Dr. Holly, what happens if I'm in the middle of having a craving? What do I do? And this is what I tell my patients. Let's have a plan. So dietary restrictions can make cravings worse. So going on a diet definitely can be something that can make it worse. So does this mean it's best to give in to food cravings? So some people say, should I eat the food I'm craving? And it kind of depends. It depends on how often you have a craving, but it also depends on what happens when you have a craving. It probably depends on whether that level of control once you begin to eat. I don't know how many of you saw this, but Jennifer Aniston, this was this year, I think back in August, she was doing an interview for, I think it was In Style magazine, and they asked what she did when she was stressed, and she said she eats one chip. She goes chomp, chomp, chomp on one chip or one M&M. Now, I can't do that. There is no way that is going to happen. Chips are my thing. I'm going to eat the whole bag of chips. I'm going to be thinking about the whole bag of chips, and I'm going to eat the whole bag of chips. But if you're a person that can be like Jennifer Aniston and you can get by on one chip, by all means, if that's going to decrease your stress and that's going to be enough for your craving, then that's what you should do. I also know people who say they can eat one little square of chocolate and put the rest away. So if they're one of those people, then absolutely that is the solution for you. My guess is most of you who are on tonight, that doesn't work or you wouldn't be here. It doesn't work for me. Like I said, chips are my thing. I can't keep bags of chips in the house because when I have a craving, if I see it, I'll crave it. If I have a craving, I'm going to not stop at one single chip. So if you're someone whose cravings get out of control, that you end up eating a whole half gallon of ice cream, a bag of chips, or a box of cookies, you need a plan B. Here's your plan B. Here's what I recommend. The first question is it hunger or a craving? And I think this is important, and this is something I teach my patients to differentiate. If it's hunger, we need to eat. If it's a craving, we're going to take a different path. So differentiating hunger versus craving becomes important. So how do you do that? How do you know if it's hunger or a craving? First off, cravings take place after you've recently eaten. They can. So if you've just eaten a big meal and you're still wanting something else, chances are that's a craving. Craving leads to eating that makes you feel good for a short period of time. Cravings tend to be transient. They may be stronger when you're restricting or limiting calories. So if you're on a diet, you're more likely to have a craving, and commonly caused by uncomfortable feelings, emotions, or stressful situations. So any of these things that are going on may make you think it's a craving. Hunger, on the other hand, occurs when you haven't eaten. So if you haven't eaten all day and you come home, you actually may be hungry. Usually can be satisfied with a healthy meal. Doesn't pass with time versus cravings can pass, tend to be transient. Hunger results in a rumbling stomach, a headache. Sometimes you feel weak. That's hunger. And it's rarely for one specific food. If you say, I want chocolate, that's probably a craving, because hunger, like I said, is rarely one thing. There's multiple different foods that would satisfy you at that moment. And here's the Dr. Holly question that I ask my patients when they're trying to differentiate. Am I hungry or am I having a craving? Is, would you eat a chicken breast and some broccoli? If you're like, yes, I would eat a chicken breast and some broccoli, chances are you're hungry and you need to go eat. And if you said, no, I don't really want a chicken breast and broccoli, but you know what I would take? That's leaning toward a craving. So what do you do if you determine it's hunger, right? I just told you there's a path. If it's hunger, you do one thing. If it's a craving, you do another. What do you do if you're really hungry or even hangry? What do you do so you don't eat too many calories? I always suggest you eat low energy density foods. Those are foods that don't have a lot of calories in a small amount of space, in a small amount of food. We'll talk about what that means a little bit more in a second, because you can eat more and you get less calories versus if you eat energy dense foods, you get a lot of calories. And when you're really hungry, that can be dangerous because you can overeat quickly. Go for volume. Go for veggies. They tend to make it low energy density. And I always recommend that everyone have what I call an emergency, I'm super hungry, go-to meal. A go-to meal is quick and easy. It's already planned out, and it's your safe, hangry meal. You know you can eat it. You can eat a large volume of it, and it's not going to have a lot of calories. You're in a dangerous situation when you're really hungry. You can eat something that's going to consume a lot of calories. And if you're on a diet or you're watching what you eat, then you're in a situation where you're allowed to eat something off plan. Sit down when you eat for sure. Slow down. Trust you will get full, because I know when you're really hungry, I'm always like, this isn't going to fill me up. And then think about, why did you get this hungry? So you don't do it over and over again. And you learn from the experience. I wanted to put this quick slide about energy density. I've been talking about eating, when you're hungry, low energy density foods, and we tend to crave high energy density foods. Energy density is the amount of energy or calories in a particular weight of food. Foods with lower energy density provide fewer calories per gram than foods with higher energy density. For the same amount of calories, a person can consume a larger portion of a food that's low in energy density than a food that's higher in energy density. So for cravings, we tend to crave things that give us a lot of calories. And what we want to consume, especially when we're hungry, is lower energy density, so we don't consume as many calories. And the way to do that is foods that have a lot of water, have a lot of fiber, because they provide not as many calories and actually increase the weight of the food and the volume of the food. So what do you do if you have a food craving? So you've determined it's not hunger. It truly is a craving. That first question was, is it hunger? The second question I always have my patients ask is, are you thirsty? And even if they say no, I say, go ahead and drink 16 ounces of water, just in case. So number 2, drink 16 glasses of water. The next thing, 16 ounces of water. The next thing I recommend is something called wait, distract, and or exercise. Because cravings can be transient, they may not last that long. I say for everybody, let's wait at least 15 minutes before we eat something. It might pass. So I have them put the timer on, put your watch on, put the clock, watch it. 15 minutes. You can sit with it. Nothing's going to happen to you in 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, if you can be distracted doing something you like, that's even better. And if you could go out for a walk or to exercise, that would be even better. But for 15 minutes, don't eat. Distract yourself and exercise if possible. The next thing I have people do in the middle of a craving is why. It's a journal. I call this a craving journal. It's where you're going to be a detective. And the reason I want you to do this is because I want you to start looking for patterns. I want you to start understanding why you're having cravings, because if you understand why, if you're aware, then you can choose to change some things that might actually allow you not to have that craving in the future. So I have people think about what emotions were leading up to that craving. How am I feeling? What situations? What routines? What is my environment like? Were there certain patterns? And how could have I prevented it? Once you start to see some commonalities, once you start to see, well, when I always come home from work at this time, when I've been stressed out at work, I always have a craving, we can try to work out and have you do a different pattern, something different so that you're not put in that situation, so that craving won't continue, or we can decrease the odds of you having that craving. And then the last thing is to pick a more healthful substitution for the craving. So you've made it down this list. You're going to eat something. You're still having that craving. Is there something you can substitute that will still do the trick, but won't be quite as bad, won't get you off track if you're trying to watch calories, or would be a little bit more healthy option than what you might choose? So that leads us to my favorite crave tricking substitutions to crush the crave. My first one, and I know I can't see you, but I know some of you are rolling your eyes. My favorite all-time thing that I crave are chips, potato chips, any kind of chips, to the point that I don't even go down the chip aisle in the grocery store. But if I am having a chip craving, I promise you guys this works. You've got to buy the thick carrot chips that are wavy. You can't just buy the little ones. You got to buy the thick ones. You got to put salt on it. You got to let them sit there. And then you shut your eyes and you eat them. And I swear to you guys, they almost taste like a thick cut potato chip, like a Ruffles thick cut chip. And there you can see I'm also having it with some avocado, some guacamole, but notice the serving size, 100 calories. So I'm limiting that. So that would be a great substitution. Works for me, might work for you. The next substitution that has been helpful for people is to use Greek non-fat plain yogurt, and then to either go sweet or to go savor. This is for when you want something kind of creamy, or a creamy type craving. You can then take this Greek non-fat plain Greek yogurt and use something like some Hidden Valley Ranch dip. You just use like a tablespoon of it, the seasoning, you put it in the yogurt, and then you use vegetables. That's the savory path. Or you could use something like Mio Drops or any brand. These are things that flavor water. You can actually make the Greek non-fat plain yogurt sweet, and now you have a sweet treat. The key here is the Greek non-fat plain yogurt. I don't know if any of you have ever eaten that, but has the mouthfeel of fat. It doesn't taste very good by itself. It's kind of sour. Some people like it, most people don't. So you got to flavor it. You either flavor it the savory route or you flavor it the sweet route, but it gives the mouthfeel of fat without any fat. And that's the trick. That's the key. It also has a lot more protein, or has some more protein than regular yogurt. That's why I like Greek. It's non-fat. That makes it less energy dense. It's plain, therefore it doesn't have any sugar in it, or just has a little bit of sugar from the yogurt, no extra or added sugar. And then you decide to make it sweet, either with something like the Mio Drops, or you go savory with the ranch. Peanut butter cravings. If you haven't used PB2 and you're a peanut butter craver, this is something for you. This is defatted peanut butter. They take the majority of the fat out. It's a powder. You use a little bit. You can put a little bit of water and get peanut butter, or you can use it as a flavoring to give you that peanut butter flavoring without all the calories, without all the fat. Ice cream cravings. Chips are number 1 for me. Ice cream's number 2 for me. I love Halo Top. This is a higher protein, lower fat type ice cream. You can eat the whole pint. And I know when I have a craving, I want to eat the whole pint, and you don't do that much damage. Here's 240 calories to 320 calories and a whole pint of ice cream. Very different than a whole pint of some of those energy dense ice creams where you can eat easily 500, 600, 700 calories in a pint. Chocolate or candy bar cravings, very common. There are some protein bars that I use in this situation. Built bars are a new to the field. These are running around 150 calories, 17 grams of protein, which is perfect. Quest bars are the same way, 20 grams of protein. They're about 200 calories, a little bit of fat, a lot of fiber, low in sugar, therefore a better option. For me, the key with a bar is it's got to taste good, but not too good. Not where I can eat 3 of them, right? Where I want to eat 1, but I don't want to eat 2. So they got to be good and something I want to eat, but not that good. Chocolate cravings, I tend to use the non-fat plain Greek yogurt and use something like sugar-free Jello. I take 1 tablespoon of that, not the whole box, and it gives it that chocolate flavor and then the mouthfeel of fat with the Greek yogurt. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about comfort foods. We're going into the winter. Some people are going to start craving those comfort foods. So I have 2 go-tos that I use when I want that comfort food for whatever reason. It's cold outside. I have memories. I want something that is comforting. The key with this is a chili, but you make the chili with very, very, very lean meat and you add pumpkin. And I know that sounds crazy, but pumpkin also has the mouthfeel of fat. So you can use a super lean meat that normally wouldn't be used in chili, and it wouldn't give that comfort taste to the chili, but you can use super lean meat if you add the pumpkin to it, and you can even add some veggies to it to get the volume, and it tastes like you used a much fattier cut of meat. So that is something you can do in the crock pot that can actually be a comfort food. The second one that I put on here is zoodles. It is zucchini that now is cut into noodles. If you haven't started using this can be a lifesaver instead of pasta. Definitely pasta and things like that tend to be comfort foods. Instead, these are zucchini noodles, and they also can be found in the produce section. You can spiralize them yourself, or you can now buy them already cut up. Here are 2 examples of some substitutions when you're wanting a comfort food, something you can substitute that might be a little bit better and keep you on track. With that, I will open it up for questions. Thank you, and I hope this has been helpful.
Dr. Holly, as always, this has been fantastic. I always love listening to you speak and hearing what you have to offer. And we do have some questions coming in, and keep them coming through the chat box, and we will monitor those. I'm going to start off with, you just spoke about the candy bars. So should people stay away from the Kind candy bars, Kind candy bars?
So you have to look on the label. Kind actually has several different kinds, and so they're not all equivalent. When I look for a candy bar, which I'm really trying to look more for a protein bar, for me, I'm looking for a little bit higher protein for satiety. I want low sugar, so you have to look on the Kind label, how much added sugar. I prefer high fiber. Why? Bigger volume, more satisfying, bigger volume in my stomach. Fiber is one of those things that makes less energy dense. And like I said, low sugar, high fiber, some protein. And like I said, doesn't taste too good, because then I want another one. So that's the key. So you have to really look at the label. I don't think the Kind, if I'm remembering right, the Kind bars, and you have to look for total calories too. I'm trying to keep it around 200 calories. So the Kind bars don't fall into that situation for me, but they may be better than some other solutions. So those would be the things I would look at.
So somebody asked, could the ingredients in the food, such as sugar, be the brain's way of crying out for something? Like people say cravings for sugar is for love and cravings for ice is because the body is low of iron.
Right. So I talked about the ice. The craving for ice has been associated with iron deficiency. That's one of the few where we have some data for. I think the other ones, it's possible. There's great hypothesis about some of these things. And definitely emotions in the body, emotions can lead to comfort. And so it's possible, but I don't think there's any good data to say that's the case. I think there may be sometimes that it's nutrients that you want. It may be sometimes that love might be part of it. It may be that you're anxious and certain things calm you down. So all those can play a role. I don't think we know for sure exactly, which ones of those are playing a role in which people, and if for sure that's actually what's going on. So if you're in that negative energy balance long enough, it makes sense that the body's going to go, oh my gosh, this isn't good. I'm going to die if this keeps up. I better give her a craving to go out and find some food. She's sitting at home not eating. She needs to go out and find some food. Let me give her a craving so she'll think about it. She'll want it intensely and go find it. So absolutely, I do think that's probably one of the reasons. I don't think it's the only reason. And I think then there's things we can do to try to minimize that. But restricting certain foods, restricting calories, I think can play a role in increasing cravings.
You mentioned sugar-free Jello. So what do you recommend if the sugar-free Jello tastes bad and they just don't like the flavor, the taste of it?
Don't eat it.
Done.
Go to get something else. I mean, this is what I always say. We all have preferences. And, if someone is allergic to strawberries, they shouldn't eat strawberries. But that didn't mean I'm not going to eat strawberries because I love strawberries. Same thing. If you don't like a certain flavor of the Jello, low sugar or no sugar Jello, then that's not a good choice for you. But there's other choices, other things that you can try to flavor your foods with.
At what point do you let yourself have a little of what you're craving?
Yeah, and that's a hard one. I think you can try that and see what happens. So I would do a little mini experiment. I've done that experiment on myself with chips, and it's not pretty. But you can try it out. If you're Jennifer Aniston and you can eat one chip, or you can eat a small bag of chips, and they don't call your name for the rest of the evening, it might be a good solution for you. But if that is not the case, then that's probably not the best solution for you.
Do you think iron deficiency can cause other cravings other than non-nutritive foods such as vegetables or proteins?
Say that one more time.
Do you think iron deficiency can cause other cravings other than non-nutritive foods such as vegetables or proteins?
Like I said, I think the only real data we have for iron deficiency is that ice craving. There may be some other cravings, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with that data set, maybe.
Okay. Is dark chocolate any better than regular or milk chocolate?
They say so. Chocolate. I eat it, man. It's. But yes, I think. But there's probably a little bit more nutritional benefit to dark chocolate than regular chocolate. But I'm not sure how much.
Sure. So we talk about how you can watch a pizza ad and then all of a sudden crave pizza. So how does advertising affect craving? Because obviously it does.
Oh yeah, cue-based. Remember we talked about cravings that come from cues.
Yeah.
So definitely seeing something on TV, but it's not everything, but definitely cue-based craving is some of it.
One of our attendees uses a tablespoon of honey in non-fat Greek yogurt as a snack. Should they avoid the honey?
Well, I mean, honey, honey is sugar, right? So if that does it for you and you like that, I don't think you have to avoid any food. If you're trying to avoid sugar, then I would avoid honey. But if that works for you, then I don't know that there's any reason why you can't have that. It kind of depends on what your goal is. What's the reason that you're trying to do that? Or are you trying to restrict sugar? Are you trying to restrict calories? There's nothing harmful with honey, but it is sugar.
So I tend to crave when I'm bored or stressed, but I also have more cravings when I'm driving on the road. And yes, I've been to that O'Hare popcorn stand, I'll admit. So can people crave, in different circumstances, maybe when they're at a football game or if they're driving, if they're flying, if they're at the beach, things like that?
Yeah. Routines and situations definitely create cravings. There's so many things that create cravings, but you're used to now being on the road, maybe being bored. You're now have created a routine that you tend to eat certain things when you're in the car. You remember that and you do it again. But if you start to realize that, you can maybe choose to relearn it, to start some new routines, to do some new habits. So part of the things we've learned, but if we recognize it, I do think that we can unlearn it or substitute perhaps some other things that might be more healthy or help you in the direction that you want to go.
So it's kind of a form of classical conditioning. You just have to recondition yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last question for you is, would you suggest not changing solely to plant-based when losing weight to minimize cravings? Or would you incorporate more plant-based and that don't drastically change your diet?
So and once again, I think you have to, what is the goal? I mean, so I guess the goal may be that they want to eat more plant-based. So would it be better to do it one way or the other? That would be less with cravings? I'm not sure I understand the question. Okay,
well, we'll end with this one then. What's your go-to crave? What do you crave the most often?
Oh, easily potato chips. Any kind of chips.
And you did say that earlier. Just plain barbecue, pepper, just any chip.
I've had them all. Pumpkin, they'll get me. They'll get me every time. I don't even go down the chip aisle. So one of my routines to keep me from getting chips is if I'm in the grocery store, never go down the chip aisle. I see the chip aisle, I say, not going. Boom. Don't go down it.
It's often the soda aisle too, so sometimes it makes it more difficult. But Dr. Holly, fantastic presentation. Great information that you gave us all. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. It was fun.
So if anybody missed anything and would like to go back and take a look at tonight's presentation, the recording will be available on our website tomorrow. If you missed a previous webinar in our The Science of series, take a look back at all of them at alumni.uab.edu/videos. I've already dropped that in the chat room. You'll find links to The Science of Broccoli, The Science of Hunger, and The Science of Shrimp, and soon The Science of Cravings. That page also features all of our past webinars and virtual events. Don't miss out on other webinars we have coming up. On Thursday, October 21st, join us for Lunch and Learn with Kathy Nelson called Time Management and Life Hacks. Looking forward to that one. I'm looking for all of these. On Tuesday, October 26th, be part of Head Trauma and Brain Health, Protecting the Mind for Years to Come with Dr. Suzanne Judd. Then on Tuesday, November 2nd, we will welcome Dr. Jeffrey Wycliffe for From Ashes to Floods, Our Changing Environment, where we'll explore current environmental health problems and future directions of the UAB School of Public Health. We'll welcome Robert Smith to our webinars on Thursday, December 9th for an important conversation about grief and the holidays, tips and strategies on how to cope. And before the new year, learn how to wow your family and friends with your cocktail making skills as part of Holiday Mixology 101 with mixologist Ryan Abrams on Thursday, December 16th. You can check out all of our virtual offerings and register for them at alumni.uab.edu/events. Let us take care of your evening. On Sunday, November 7th, join us for our 13th annual Uncork Education. We've partnered with Perry's Steakhouse to offer regional dining options while welcoming students from the UAB Department of Music for the evening's entertainment. We have something for everybody, ranging from a night of music only to a dinner for 6 from Perry's Steakhouse with a to-go order. Find out more at alumni.uab.edu/uncork. If you're looking for a podcast to listen to during your day or to and from work, check out UAB Green and Told. Our podcast features members of the UAB community and is released every other week. You can find it on Spotify and the Apple Podcast app or visit alumni.uab.edu/Green and Told. And stay on top of everything alumni on social media. Just search UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On LinkedIn, search UAB Alumni Career Community. If you need to get a hold of us, email us at alumni@uab.edu. A lot of information for you tonight. Been a great evening listening to Dr. Holly. Once again, thank you all for joining us for tonight's discussion. Have a great evening, and as always, go Blazers.